Ottawa's electric rail system got off to a tumultuous start when it opened in 2019, but ever since, expansion has moved forward at a breakneck pace. And despite it being one of the largest transit expansions in North America, you do barely hear about the expansion part, probably unsurprisingly. But the plans for Canada's National Capital Region's rail transit network are much larger, because a large portion of it lying across the Ottawa River in Quebec, Gatineau to be specific, is gearing up to build its own rail system. But this is where the problems begin. Today, the transit system in the Ottawa region is separated into two parts. There's the Ottawa part and the Gatineau part, served by OC Transpo and STO respectively. Over the past 2 decades, Ottawa has slowly and now quickly expanded its rail network. And since 2019, that expansion has been going on with a rapid pace, with expansions going on right now in 3 different directions. But there is one thing that isn't in those system expansion plans, a connection across the Ottawa River to Gatineau, which again makes up a large portion of the National Capital Region. Now to be fair, that's not really the fault of OC Transpo, since serving Gatineau, it just isn't in its mandate. But that's probably not a good thing. Cities like Ottawa that cross major borders are always going to have a harder time organizing themselves and their transport networks because there are different authorities involved serving different areas. And in Ottawa's case, we're also talking about Canada's capital city here. As I mentioned before, Gatineau is planning a rail system right now. But since transit isn't organized in a regional fashion that crosses that border, and despite the fact that Gatineau's system will share a number of technical aspects with Ottawa's, there's no plan for direct integration. Instead, Gatineau is planning for its entirely separate tram system to cross the Ottawa River on the Portage Bridge and dead end in downtown Ottawa, likely only meters away from the brand new rail tunnel that OC Transpo built for Ottawa's rail network. Now, interestingly, CPCS, the former consulting arm of Canadian Pacific Railway, actually has a proposal for a different plan for Gatineau that I found when I was browsing the web. I'll link it down below. And the plan basically suggests that instead of Gatineau building its own independent system from Ottawa, it should instead build a system which is directly integrated into Ottawa's system. This would mean the systems would share infrastructure in some places, and it would also eliminate the inconvenient switch from one train to another when you're in downtown Ottawa if you're not just traveling to downtown and you're going to Carleton or Ottawa or any of the major transportation hubs or any manner of other places within Ottawa. That should of course be a pretty major consideration with the shift away from commuter-focused transit since the pandemic, especially in Ottawa and Gatineau where there are a large number of government workers who will increasingly be working from home in the future. Now, sometimes when ideas like this come out of left field, the initial response is skepticism, and that's probably healthy. But I have to say that in this case, it seems very much rational that Gatineau and Ottawa should not have entirely separate rail systems and instead should have one regional one. If this seems like an outlandish idea, it really shouldn't. Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States, has a similar situation to Ottawa, where it's split across multiple political jurisdictions. In that case, Virginia, Maryland, and the District of Columbia itself. And yet, Washington, D.C. has a single, nice, integrated metro rail network. It's not perfect, but it is nicely integrated, and you're never going to be able to tell when you cross the border from one state to another. So in the case of Ottawa, what changes are actually suggested? Well, they actually aren't all that radical. The system could mostly be built as planned, but instead of being connected at the Portage Bridge, a connection would be made with the existing Ottawa rail system at the Prince of Wales Bridge, which has been renamed, I think, but I don't know the new name because it's just the Prince of Wales Bridge, right? Now, at the same time, instead of building 2 western branches for the Gatineau tram system, the plan suggests converting the existing rapid bus corridor into another rail service, which sort of makes sense given that it is an old rail corridor in the first place that originally went over the Prince of Wales Bridge. Now, your immediate reaction might be to mention that apparently the Prince of Wales Bridge cannot handle rail traffic, and that may be a legitimate problem. But the truth is that in situations like this, a convenient connection shouldn't be derailed by the fact that some old existing infrastructure can't be reused. If you absolutely can't use the Prince of Wales Bridge, you can build a new one right next to it. And you still get all of the benefits of convenient connections to major transit corridors on both the Gatineau and the Ottawa sides. Now, while a connection here may seem less convenient than having a downtown connection, which would still be provided by STO bus services, what it would mean is far better regional integration, which should be a bigger focus. For one, O-Train Line 2 could inexpensively be converted to the same standards as O-Train Line 1 and the Gatineau tram, with slight adjustments needing to be made to things like the platform height and length, but most of the work is already being done right now for the current expansion plans. There are existing and some new diesel trains for this line, but those trains could be used in a million different places for useful transit services in Canada, or they could even be used for new super regional services in Ottawa, using some of the rail corridors that the city has bought up over the years. The great thing about converting O-Train Line 2 to have the same standards as the Gatineau tram and the O-Train Line 1 service is that it would allow for direct service to Ottawa's airport from Gatineau and other points north of the river. It would also reduce the transfers by at least one to go from downtown Ottawa to the airport, which would be a win. Now, the remaining single-track parts of the line would likely need to be doubled, and most importantly of those would probably be the Dow's Lake Tunnel, but I don't really think that's the end of the world. A new tunnel can be built to the west of the existing one, and we could turn the existing one into an excellent pedestrian and cycling connection, which would be cool to see, honestly. Now, if you're curious, there's no reason that by connecting into Ottawa's system, which is effectively metro-like because it has no road crossings, it's fully grade separated, would mean that Gatineau couldn't still build its lines as it's planning as a tram system that would have some road interactions and road crossings. But that being said, the rapid bus corridor is already pretty well separated from traffic, and you could build a new elevated or perhaps even tunneled line along that corridor pretty easily. Of course, though, that's not even necessary. Since the corridor is pretty well separated from other traffic, you could simply implement crossing gates like are used on LRT systems in Edmonton and Calgary, and as was originally planned on the outlying parts of Ottawa's system. All that really matters for Gatineau's trams to be able to interoperate onto Ottawa's rail system would be compatibility with things like the platform heights and the voltage of the overhead power lines. And the truth is that on the Gatineau side, you could start with a tram and, if demand warrants it, slowly upgrade it to be more like the O-Train system. Now, it is worth pointing out that historically, OC Transpo has mentioned that it doesn't like the idea of extending O-Train Line 2 north into Gatineau because of capacity concerns at Bayview Station. But there's actually a pretty good potential solution to that. Given the height difference between Line 2 and Line 1 at Bayview, you could build a fly-under connection from the northern tracks heading out to Gatineau and the eastern tracks heading to downtown Ottawa on Line 1. This would allow direct service from Gatineau into downtown Ottawa and should alleviate any concerns about overcrowding at Bayview by simply bypassing it. And this wouldn't be a connectivity problem since some trains would run direct onto O-Train Line 2 to the south. Now, if you're wondering about capacity on the Ottawa side, downtown Ottawa and its transit tunnel probably has capacity for at least the next 2 decades. The tunnel features large stations which have platforms that can be extended quite substantially, and it also has communications-based train control, which should make pushing 30 or even more trains per hour through the tunnel possible, and currently Ottawa only uses 15 of those. So if Gatineau even just wanted to operate a tram every 7 minutes, which is completely reasonable, and probably overkill on any service that would be running direct downtown to downtown, then it could do that without even pushing the tunnel's capacity over 24 trains per hour. So Ottawa could still add lots of additional through trains to the west and the east. At the same time, this would have major transportation benefits for Gatineau and economic benefits for Ottawa, because residents in Gatineau could now have easy single-seat trips to the Ottawa airport and the Ottawa Via Rail station, which would now effectively also serve Gatineau conveniently. At the same time, if the project in Gatineau funded the double tracking of O-Train Line 2 in Ottawa, then Ottawa would be benefiting its transportation network a lot by better integrating with Gatineau. At the same time, probably the best part of this plan is it really does nothing to limit the long-term capacity of either the Gatineau or Ottawa rail systems, since if demand was so high in the future that the Ottawa downtown rail tunnel became overcrowded, you could simply build a new east-west link to the north of it, sort of where the Gatineau tram is currently planned to go. Instead, though, what you could do is reroute the trains from Gatineau and the trains from O-Train Line 2 into this new northern tunnel, freeing up lots of capacity in the existing one and adding new connections, potentially even further east to Vanier. And if all of the Le Breton Flats isn't completely condos by the time any of this happens, you could even have a cool cross-platform interchange station sort of where Pimoussy is right now. Ultimately, there's no reason Ottawa shouldn't have an impressive region-scaled rail network, akin to other great capital cities around the world, from London to Paris to Washington, D.C. And it would take surprisingly few changes to get us there. Thanks for watching.